I sat on the side of my bed, pills dissolving inside me. I could feel them breaking apart, ready to be processed and then enter my bloodstream. Soon the digital clay-like texturing would envelop my vision and all perception would change. I've called it many things, but for now I'll refer to it as the other place. I had experimented with lucid dreams before, and what some call astral projection, a painful misnomer, but I digress. The goal was to, through meditation, induce a dreamlike state, keeping motor functions active and convincing one's brain that it is actually walking around while in a stationary state of sleep paralysis. The resolution of my eyes seemed to dip, static and white noise filling the gaps between my rods and cones. It was probably time to lay down. Convincing your brain it was walking around was the easy part. The hard part was to see the environment you were moving around in. I had generally tried to imagine my house and bedroom. After having sat up in the dream and clawed my way out of my physical body, I'd walk around, inspect my room and walls, my bed, pace in circles until the room collapsed around me and I'd wake up, back in the meat prison. I started feeling the static, buzzing energy running through my limbs, consciousness beginning to recede until I would be a tiny thing inside a skull, peering out at the world through eyes that sent me images but were not my own. I'd never tried to induce a dream from the other place before. I thought it might be easier given how disconnected you feel from your body while you're there. Perhaps the emotional and physical detachment it provided would make seeing the dream easier, more vivid. I wanted to be powerful in my dreams. There was always a distinct moment when I would suddenly find myself in the other place. Once I had popped over, it was time to lay down, before I lost track of what I needed to do. I put the headphones on and closed my eyes. Remove all direct sensory input and substitute it with falsehoods of my own creation. Something about being in the other place I'd forgotten to mention. Piloting the flesh vehicle became very different and very difficult. You walked around, if you even could, in a very robotic manner. It took massive amounts of concentration to physically do anything. While the mind remained free, depending on your dosage, the functionality of one's body ranged from mostly functional to pseudo-coma. I had aimed for somewhere in between those extremes this time. I didn't want to be completely consumed by the other place. I just wanted to invite it in, take advantage of its more unique qualities. I'd practiced with guided meditations before, but this time I just used the headphones to deaden the outside sound. I lay there, floating in the silence of my mind. Breathe in. Breathe out. With each in-breath, visualize your fingers in as much detail as you can muster. With each out-breath, let them go. Allow the visualization to dissolve as your fingers fade away. Breathe in. Breathe out. There go your toes. Breathe in. Breathe out. Then your arms and legs, up your back, around your chest. Let disintegration flow over you and around the back of your head and over your face. Breathe in. Breathe out. Let your eyes evaporate. You are nothing. You have been nothing. Floating, still, nowhere. Let thoughts become everything. Raise your hands. Raise your hands in front of your nothing eyes and see them as vividly as when you started. During previous attempts at this, my dream body was pale white in color and appeared solid. It almost seemed to glow faintly too. I lifted my hands in front of my eyes and saw stars, galaxies. Though initially white, just as before, the white exterior quickly became translucent, then transparent, revealing the true form and structure underneath. It was as though the visual snow from earlier, the untuned signal in between the pixels of my vision, had come to life. This was where the glow was coming from, I wasn't remotely solid, and it was absolutely beautiful. My body had taken on the character of the other place. I was stardust, made of TV static, and I had only just started. The general strategy after you've raised your dream hands out of your body is to either roll back and forth gently until you roll out of your body, or to create a rope above you and pull yourself out. This time I rocked back and forth gently, as practiced, and then I fell through my bed. Suddenly I was under the bed frame. It was dark around me, but the bed frame was illuminated. It was made of the TV static, but not the stars. I was the star child, and the bed was just a bed. I crawled out from under the bed and stood up, taking stock of my situation. My entire body was stars and galaxies and dust swirling around. The rest of the room was in black and white. All the furniture, my desk and drums, everything was composed of TV static. They retained the clay-like digital texture of the other place, but with none of the color. And in place of the color was the buzzing, frantic, moving visual white noise. The white noise that crept out of the gaps between the pixels in my eyes before I had laid down, the white noise of an untuned antenna. I remembered I had a standing mirror on the far side of the room, and immediately I was overwhelmed with curiosity. I looked at my feet as I crossed the room, careful to place them in the correct places. I had to keep my balance. Interestingly, I didn't experience any of the challenge normally associated with moving a body in the other place. I felt very connected to this dream body, this bizarre constellation of stars and energy. Moving around in these kind of dreams was always challenging, but it wasn't made any more challenging by infusing the dream state with the other place. What would I see in the mirror? Would I see me? What would my face look like? If I didn't see anyone, could I step through the mirror? I arrived at the other side of the room. I paused briefly, then looked up at the mirror. My old dream body looked back at me. White, glowing limbs and a smooth, white, glowing torso. It had no genitals, no musculature. It was the impression of a human being, with none of the specifics. And then, Jesus Christ, the eyes. It had eyes. It had fucking enormous orange glowing eyes. And not like large eyes with orange irises. The whole things were semi-uniform, bright neon orange, and they were the circumference of tennis balls, but the surface was only slightly convex, like goggles. It had a black void where its mouth should be, perfectly circular and about the size of my fist. This was not my reflection. It couldn't be. This was not me. I experimentally moved around, left, right, back, forth. I waved my hand, tilted my head. It mirrored my movements with a slight delay, like when a game has input lag. God, the eyes were so orange. I looked down at myself, still the same constellation of stars and galaxies, then back up at the entity. I couldn't seem to speak. Somehow it knew me. It knew everything. I don't mean secrets of the universe type things, like how to marry quantum mechanics and general relativity, or why we're all here. It knew everything about me. It knew my life and my family, my experiences, passions, everything that makes me, me. I turned around and looked at my body, my real body, still laying in bed with headphones on. Only the headphones weren't there, and his skin was the same pale, glowing white. It was featureless like a mannequin, just a placeholder where an artist would draw the real face, if they could ever get around to it. I dubbed him Antenna Man, as perceptively speaking, he was broadcasting everything that was happening in this dream. Was the entity... was it the manifestation of the other place? The other place personified? It wasn't me, but it was definitely coming from me. And then it clicked. It must be Jane. Who else could be so aware of and interlinked with me and so distinctly separate from me simultaneously? Jane had always manifested in dreams as a chameleon, though. When I would dream of the tree of life, the one inside the consuming moon that had masked children playing underneath its enormous branches, Jane would crawl along the branches and inspect them, phasing between them as though in some sort of macroscopic state of quantum superposition. She said the tree was representative of all possible decisions and states, and that it was her job to help me find the branches where I stayed alive. How ironic that I would eventually almost kill myself trying to meet her again. I looked back at the mirror. God, the eyes were so orange. I couldn't get over it. The color was enchanting and scary and divine, and they saw right through me. And then she walked away. She just turned and walked away, not mirroring my movements. She just fucking turned and walked away, out of frame of the mirror and off to fuck knows where. I pressed up against the mirror trying to see where she'd gone, but it was solid. I turned and walked to my door. It was closed. Unable to interact with it, I decided to try to walk through it, and succeeded. I walked around the back side of the wall. Maybe she'd ended up on my side of the mirror. I checked the basement entranceway and the bathroom and the downstairs living room. Nothing. Nothing but the house I was living in, textured like three-dimensional TV static. I returned to my room. Experimentally, I jumped towards the ceiling. I jumped so high I went right through it and landed halfway into the upstairs living room. My hands planted on the floor while my legs phased through, hanging down to my room below. For some reason, when it was a ceiling, it was permeable, but as a floor, it was solid. Curious. I rocked my legs back and forth and swung them up over the floor. After a quick inspection of the upper floor yielded no Jane, I returned to the living room. The usually black leather couch looked especially energetic, black and white lines and dots running chaotically underneath the translucent clay. I looked up. If ceilings are permeable, might as well try it. I jumped through the ceiling and landed on the roof. Scanned around the yard, looked at the other houses. It seemed as though the TV static texture was localized to me. As I looked farther and farther away, the streets lost the texture and were just made of the digital clay. The stream was local to me. Inside the other place and beyond the bounds of what I can imagine, memories filled the gaps. My visual horizon didn't extend to the actual horizon. At a certain point, my capacity to visualize details just stopped. I was the center of my own little simulation, and the draw distance only really extended a few hundred meters before everything was just a vague impression of scattered houses, trees, and mountains. Jane was nowhere to be seen, so I looked up. I was a star child after all. Perhaps there would be something meaningful to see up there. As soon as I wondered what it would be like up there, floating in space, I was ejected from the roof and launched into the sky. I spun around and around. With every rotation, I saw my house get smaller and smaller. Jane was standing where I had been standing prior to liftoff. She watched me with her unbreaking, unchanging expression as I flew out towards Jupiter. I never did make it to the big red planet. I never made it to the small red planet, or anywhere in specific. I just floated out in space, watching my beautiful Earth become smaller and smaller, until I was completely alone. I couldn't see stars far away. The draw distance on my little simulated reality was too short. You'd think you wouldn't be able to feel the spinning, but I did. Absent any frame of reference, my body knew it was still spinning, head over ass. I tucked into the fetal position. It felt safer, even though it accelerated the rotation. Even in a dream, physics gonna physics. I looked again at my hands as I spun, stars and galaxies and dust. Holy shit, was I the universe? Could I not see stars far away because I was made of all the stars that there were? I waited there, in the nothing. Had Jane wanted me to leave? What was she doing there without me? Surely I hadn't left if I had become all that there is. Perhaps I was giving this apparition too much credit. This was my dream, after all. This was too much. I was too much. The spinning was too much and too fast, and I didn't know how much longer I could last, and I opened my eyes. My real, physical, meat eyes, and looked around. My body was still asleep, and I was still in the other place. Surely I'd be there for some time yet. It was relieving to see color again. I wiggled a bit. The challenges to motor function that came while inside the other place were back. It was very strange to transition from a dream to the other place, it being a somewhat dreamlike state in and of itself. I removed my headphones and sat up, swung my feet over the bedside. What the hell had just happened? I spent the remainder of the night in silence. I couldn't get her face out of my head. So alien. but familiar. Compassionate yet calculating, she knew me. She was of me, but she was not me. Jane never came to me as a humanoid again. She never came to me so directly again, either chameleon or otherwise. There was a time when I thought she'd died. And in a way, she has now, though reborn as Ava. But that's a whole other story.